The Fleesley Galway Council provided evidence that to overcome barriers to cultural participation, it is important to support communities to grow the cultural activities they want to see rather than taking a top-down
What
approach.
an absolute pleasure it is to co-host tonight's Stovies on Tour event, I think is right to say, here in the Scottish Parliament. I'm unashamedly going to...
Today, we are here to talk about one specific part of that cultural spectrum and to make a case for a degree of independence for this area of practice. We're talking about culture that is created in and grows from the grassroots of communities.
To the people that are working in this area, to everyone in this room, it's your accounts of the challenges and your understanding of how important culture is in our communities that is so important. And the Stove Network also came to a committee launch, and at that event I had managed, totally abusing my position as convener, to get our local recovery group along, who had been working, playing music and doing some art. And they played a song that they'd written for themselves about their own recovery. And in the Q&A session at that point, one of the women actually said it saved her life. If she didn't have that music, that learning, that opportunity, she really didn't know how she would have got to a stage of recovery from her addiction issues. And that's how important what you do for communities is. So thank you very much.
When I think about this, I often think too about the deceased poet Derek Mahon, who's one of our best-known poets, and he has this amazing line in one of his best-known poems, "Places where a thought might grow." And that's, to me, is very much what creative placemaking is doing. How are we going to grow those fantastic thoughts and create those communities and create those synergies and connections? And that's what we're trying to do in the Arts Council. And our current mantra of one of our campaigns is more places, more spaces, more people.
Now, much of rights-based practice begins with bridging the inequalities based on race, religion, gender, age, cultural identity and class, and it begins with those furthest from the right. So our aim was to explore barriers to cultural participation by raising alternative perspectives and challenging privileged hierarchies through artistic collaborations often based on intangible cultural heritage and themes of migration. We delivered a series of socially engaged artist residencies through first languages, Arabic, Cantonese, Mandarin, Polish, Farsi and English. We brought many of those cultural communities together in our underused and unwelcoming community centre, and we asked them, what does the right to your cultural life look like?
And we spend a lot of time thinking about the barriers of people's involvement in local decision making and taking. I think we often don't think of decision taking. And people's agency to really be active, both in cultural participation, but also wider decisions around the places and spaces that they live in. Our approach, we really try to root our approach in care and collaboration. There's obviously an ongoing process, it's never finished. And our work centres around the role of creativity, the arts and imagination in bringing people together around complex issues and challenges.
So this is an approach to community building, I suppose, is one of the ways that I like to talk about it. Also creative placemaking. It not only grows relationships with all who have a stake in a place, a local community, regional, national partners, to enact long-term visions, but really importantly, it also creates work opportunities and a greater diversity of work opportunities. And I can say that from a really my own personal experience in the spaces that creative freelancers can step into. And importantly, it builds on and supports the development of local expertise, knowledge and capacity to take projects and programs forward for themselves. So it really is the community groups and organisations that are working with artists to have these ideas, but then they are taking that work forward.
But I think at the moment it's trying to get over that barrier, the constant request for more evidencing when it is absolutely there and obvious. Okay. And actually getting to the point where we just take for granted cultural engagement has a positive impact. and we start working out how we can create a better structure for it. That would be my, I think I've recently been involved with some conversations and it's like, if we can agree that physical activity is good for your health as a principle, and we get on with how we can encourage and how people engage and what can we do, we need the same thing for cultural engagement. We just need to get beyond the fact that it's been evidenced. It is.
There's a workforce across Scotland and across the world actually, who are experts in this field of artistry. And I'm interested in the models that are evolving in Ireland, where the processes of artistry and the verbs of artistry are coming to obviously being practiced, like collaboration and co-creation and empathy and community. We know how that works with artistry and culture. And I wanted to plant that here because it's the Scottish Parliament that we should stop thinking of the arts as fluffy and start really clearly saying we know they're not, and that they're an essential part, not just a right, but an essential part of who we are and what we can become.
We have our existing communities, and how do we start to turn those into ecological communities? And that's what you're doing. You're transforming them through culture into communities where people feel connected to each other, but also connected to the place, and to me, most importantly, connected to nature. And how are we going to look forward into a future where we are drawing from nature, responding to the climate, and we're using the arts to do that?
These artists came and went, they blew my mind, because my thinking of artists was like Van Gogh, kind of like that's what an artist was. See, when I met Alice and Rosie, they blew my mind. So they started up a workshop for women, young women in our community that came along, and they started building planters, and they use their planters, and all we grow is onions, tatties and carrots, because you can use them three main ingredients in soups, stews and casseroles. We've got Delicious that came along, and they started up a group. They grow wheat. That wheat is now used in the cabin to turn into bread and pastries. We have got wild raspberries, wild rhubarb and all that growing. That gets turned into tarts with the pastries that they grow for the wheat. The bread is used for the soup, the stew and the casserole. So I feel like Jesus here, I'm feeding the 500.